Welcome to Taiwan Report, news and analysis from Taiwan. I'm Donovan Smith. Up today on the show, we've got milking migrants, trial expanded, the gender pay gap narrows, solar is starting to shine, public shaming is now part of a new law, Mazu's on the march, and Wu Zihuai's hands will not be in the cookie jar. Kicking off, we've got illegal taxi drivers fined 8.5 million by inspectors, according to the Taipei Times. 17 illegal taxi drivers were fined a total of 8.5 million NT during a 4-day crackdown that ended on Sunday. The Highway Authority launched the crackdown after a 60-year-old unlicensed taxi driver in central Taiwan apparently contracted COVID-19 from a passenger, a Taiwanese businessman based in China. The driver later died, and 4 of his relatives were also confirmed to have contracted COVID-19. Now, the purpose for this crackdown is, as they say here, the public is advised to use legal taxi services as they follow the disease prevention regulations. Now, here in Taichung, for example, the Taichung city government has been setting out hazmat-suited workers to hose down and sterilize the cabs here. I think it's the same in other areas in the country. Here, focus Taiwan to allow more migrant workers in local farming sector. Now, up to this point, they've been allowed to work in dairy farms, essentially milking cows. However, the limit is being raised from 800 people to 2,400 for the year and expanded to include sectors other than dairy farming, such as land-based aquaculture and animal husbandry, poultry, hogs, and cattle. Migrant workers will be allowed to work in more specific areas of farming, including orchid, edible mushroom, and vegetable cultivation. Now, there's a major farm labor shortage here in Taiwan, and it has, in some cases, tragic consequences other than just simply that there are no children willing to take over the family farm. I'll give you an example. In Nantou, something that I see quite often reporting here from central Taiwan, are these cases where there'll be a truck, a flatbed truck, with a bunch of people in the back who are being ferried back and forth to pick tea. Now, this article doesn't specify whether or not these migrant workers will be able to work in the tea farming business, but I certainly hope so, because what happens is, in those little narrow roads, is sometimes they go off the side and they have a horrific accident and a whole bunch of people die. However, the average age of the people who are picking the tea is generally in the 70s. These are 70-year-old people working out picking tea. It's a very hard, back-breaking work. Now, the pay is quite good, but in spite of the pay being quite good, they still can't get young workers to come and do it. Obviously, Taiwan tea is world famous, and it's a major business, but it seems no matter how much money they throw at young workers, they're just not interested. All right, from Focus Taiwan, Taiwan's gender pay gap narrowed slightly in 2019. Over the past decade, the average hourly wage gap in the country has been reduced from 17.9% in 2009 to 14.2% in 2019, translating to a fall from 66 to 52 extra workdays for women to achieve the same pay level as men, the ministry said. Despite the existing differences, Taiwan is relatively advanced in reducing gaps in pay between genders compared to some other countries, according to the ministry. In 2018, for instance, the pay rate gap between men and women was 32.3% in Japan, 32.2% in South Korea, and 18.5% in the United States. In PV Magazine, they're reporting that Taiwan is to add 2.2 gigawatts of new solar this year. According to global data, the country saw deployment of 1.6 gigawatts of new PV installations last year, with cumulative capacity reaching 4.3 gigawatts. Overall, around 20 gigawatts of new PV power should be installed on the island over the next 6 years. Now, that probably doesn't mean much, hearing 2.2 gigawatts. Now, in practice, that's not actually that much, because obviously the sun doesn't shine all the time. So the percentage of that capacity that they'll actually achieve is unfortunately much lower than that. But 2.2 gigawatts, if they were to have 100% capacity, compares to about 40% of the Taichung power plant, which is the biggest power plant in the country, which is about 5.5 gigawatts. Now, in practice, maybe it'll be 40% or something like that is what the solar will actually generate. But if they're talking about 20 gigawatts of new PV power installed on the island over the next 6 years, that might translate to 6, 8, 10, depending on the efficiency of the solar cells. So that is still quite significant. They're also looking at, by 2030, having about 10 gigawatts of offshore wind, which is a little bit more reliable than solar because it's out in the Taiwan Strait. This is offshore wind. But, again, it's not 100% because the wind sometimes dies down. All right, in Focus Taiwan, a law passes to disclose personal information of quarantine offenders. Now, this is part of a larger package which saw laws about, for example, companies can't punish their staff if they're quarantined, and increase penalties for spreading fake news. Now, this is what's interesting here. There are over 20,000 people currently undergoing home isolation or quarantine, according to the labor minister. And now, this new law, however, says that under the quarantine rules, people who are subject to home isolation or quarantine must remain at home at a designated place of quarantine with electronic monitoring for 14 days. This new law allows the chief of the Central Epidemic Command Center to permit filming, photographing, and disclosing the personal information of people who violate their home isolation or quarantine obligations. Now, 2 comments on this. One, from a practical perspective, shaming quite often works. This is also a way of alerting people that if they've come in contact with this person, then they should be aware of that and possibly have themselves checked out. So from a practical perspective, this could be effective. However, Taiwan has very strong privacy laws. This may be illegal, and also it raises some ethical questions. All right, in RTI, this report leaves a bit out, but the Matsu Pilgrimage is to go on as planned, according to the head of the temple. Now, the Dajia Zhenlan Mazu Temple is the start of the Dajia Mazu procession, or the pilgrimage. Now, in the pilgrimage, they take a statue of Mazu, a sea goddess, and they carry her around on a palanquin throughout Taichung, Zhanghua, Yunlin, and into Jiayi, and it visits a whole series of temples along the way. Essentially, this statue of Matsu is surveying her domain. It's the largest such event in the Mazu religion, and normally, on a normal year, hundreds of thousands, or according to this report, more than 1 million believers will join it at some point or another. Now, the people get really close to the palanquin, and what they want is to get blessings from the statue. And in fact, historically, people have sometimes kidnapped it and taken it to their place of business or residence for the blessings. But the problem with this, of course, is that this is supposed to kick off on March 19th. It's a hugely crowded event. The people who are joined in the pilgrimage often stay together in the same gymnasiums or places that allow them to stay, all in very close quarters. Now, the Zhanghua county government has already asked people to wear face masks, bring your own eating utensils, but the interior minister and Su Zhensang have called for this to be delayed. However, the chairman of the Dajia Zhenlan Temple, Yan Qingbiao, who previously was a Taichung County commissioner and lawmaker who's been jailed for various things, including gun charges and for spending public tax dollars on hostess bars into the tune of millions, he now heads this temple, and he came out and said that people shouldn't be worried because Mazu would eradicate the coronavirus. So my recommendation is for him to talk to Terry Go and see how his conversation with Matsu went. All right, finally, we got a little bit of good news here. Wu Zihuai, the controversial KMT lawmaker who just joined the legislature for this new session, he has been well known. He's an ex-brigadier general, and he is widely suspected of having really close ties to the PRC and the Chinese Communist Party. For example, he was filmed standing at an event with Xi Jinping, the chairman of the Chinese Communist Party, at an event where he attended. He stood for the PRC national anthem. Now, it's unclear from the footage whether he put his hand on his heart or not, but that's still a little bit alarming from an ex-military man here. He also, on a TV station, helped or provided tips and suggestions on how to defeat the United States in war for the Chinese communists. So his loyalty is somewhat in doubt. Now, the good news is that he has been turned down. He did not win the draw to become a member of the important Foreign Affairs and National Defense Committee in the legislature. That would have allowed him to get access to more sensitive documents, and a lot of people are concerned that he could not be trusted with them. Now, so that is good. Now, what is he actually going to be doing? Well, the caucus convener said that they're going to discuss with him what is his second choice or preference for a committee, and then they will negotiate from there. And finally, a shout out to an article here. Check out today's must-read is at Ketagalan Media, which, of course, I'm a big fan of. The article is Vestiges of Authoritarianism, the KMT's Patronage Network, and it goes through the history of it. All right, remember, news is ongoing. Be sure to tune in tomorrow, and see you next time.
This has been brought to you by the Taiwan Report. For more content like this, become our patron at report.tw.
还有就是那个台湾狗啦，最喜欢我的台湾狗了。